Zeitoun, page 124. I really want you to leave, she said. The news coming out of the city is so bad. There's looting, killing. Something bad is going to happen to you. Zeitoun could hear how worried she was, but he hadn't seen anything like the chaos she described. If it existed at all, and she knew how the media was, it would be downtown where he was, he said. It was so quiet, so calm, so otherworldly and strange that he couldn't possibly be in danger. Maybe, he said, there was a reason he'd stayed, a reason he'd bought that canoe, a reason he had put his in this particular situation at this particular time. I feel like I'm supposed to be here, he said. Kathy was silent. It's God's will, he said, and had no answer to this. They moved on to practical matters. Her cell phone never worked well at Yuko's house in Phoenix, so she gave Zeitoun the landline there. He wrote it down on a piece of paper and left it by the Claiborne phone. Get the kids into school when you get to Phoenix, he said. Kathy rolled her eyes. Of course, she said. I love you and them, he said, and they hung up. He set out again and immediately saw Charlie Ray, who lived just to the right of the Claiborne house. He was a blue-eyed carpenter in his 50s, a friendly and easygoing native Zeitoun had known for years. He was sitting on his porch like today was a day like any other. You stayed too, Zeitoun said. I guess I did. You need anything? Water? Charlie didn't, but said he might soon. Zeitoun promised to check in with him again and paddled off, curious about how many people had remained in the city. If Frank stayed and Todd and Charlie had weathered the storm, surely there were tens of thousands more. He was not alone in his defiance. He continued on, knowing he should feel tired, but he was not at all tired. He was never felt stronger. This day he ventured closer to downtown, passing families wading through the water, pushing laundry tubs full of their possessions. He paddled by a pair of women pushing an inflatable baby pool, their clothes and food inside. Each time Zeitoun asked if he could help, and occasionally they would ask for a bottle or two of water, he would hand them whatever he had. He was finding so many things, bottled water, MREs, canned food, and whenever he saw anyone, he gave them whatever was in his canoe. He had plenty for himself at home, and didn't want any more weighing him down. He paddled up to the I-10 ramp at Claiborne and Podiris, a concrete structure about 10 feet above the water line. Dozens of people were there waiting for rescue. A helicopter had dropped off water and food, and they seemed to be well provisioned. They asked Zeitoun if he wanted any water, and he said that he had enough, but that he would bring it to those who needed it. They gave him a case. As it turned his canoe around, he was half-dozen dogs with the group, most of them puppies. They seemed healthy and well-fed, and were keeping cool from the heat under the shade of the cars. Zeitoun, assuming that whatever was ailing the city was likely worse downtown, chose not to get too close to the epicenter. He turned around and made his way back to Dart Street. As Kathy was driving to Houston, Hugo was making arrangements for the family to spend the night with a longtime friend of theirs she called Miss Mary. Like Yuko and Kathy, Mary was an American born into a Christian household who had converted to Islam as an adult. Now her house had become a sanctuary for families fleeing the storm, and when Kathy's Odyssey pulled into the driveway, there were already a dozen or more people there, all of them Muslims from New Orleans and other parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. Mary, a bright-eyed woman in her 40s, met Kathy and the kids in the driveway. She took their bags and hugged Kathy so tight that Kathy started crying yet again. Mary took them inside and showed the kids the pool in the back, and within minutes the four of them were swimming and happy. Kathy collapsed on the couch and tried not to think of anything. When he got back to the house on Dart, Zeitoun found his tent in the water below. It had been blown off the roof, probably, Zeitoun guessed, by a helicopter. He retrieved it and sat up again, dried the interior with towels, and then went inside the house to look for ballast. He brought out stacks of books, this time the heaviest one he could find, and put them in the corners of the tent. As he was inside stabilizing it, he heard another helicopter approach. The sound was deafening. He expected it to pass over his house on its way elsewhere, but when he poked his head out and looked up, he saw that it was hovering over his house, over him. Two men inside were signaling to him. He waved them off, trying to indicate that he was fine, but this only seemed to intrigue them more. The second man in the helicopter was beginning to lower a cage to him, as Zeitoun thought to give the man a thumbs up. He signaled to his tent and then to himself and gave the helicopter a series of frantic thumbs up and an A-OK signals. Finally understanding Zeitoun's intent to say, one of the men in the helicopter decided to drop a box of water down to him. Zeitoun tried to wave him off again, to no avail. The box came down, and Zeitoun leapt out of the way before it knocked the tent flat and sent plastic bottles bouncing everywhere. Satisfied, the helicopter tilted away and was gone. Zeitoun returned to stabilizing his shelter, beginning to get ready for bed. But like the night before, he was restless, his mind racing with the events of the day. He sat on the roof, watching the movement of the helicopter circling and swooping over the rest of the city. He made plans for the following day. He would venture further toward downtown. He would revisit the I-10 overpass. He would check on the state of their office and warehouse over on Dublin Street, on the first floor where they kept their extra supplies, tools, paints, brushes, drop cloths, everything. And on the second floor they had their offices and their computers, files, maps, invoices, deeds to the properties. He was thinking of what had become of the building, a rickety thing to begin with. All night the helicopters roamed overhead. Beside them it was quiet. He heard no dogs. After the prayers he fell asleep under a vibrating sky.